right. Peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Welcome, everyone. Peace and blessings, Doc. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good, brother.
All
Good.
right.
Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So today, our program, we're going to be discussing who is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and what is her contribution to the rise of Black people. We want to welcome Deacon of Reality to the program. Peace and blessings, Deacon. Good to see you in the house.
Peace, bro.
So, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, what's your thoughts on her? Who is she?
Man, that takes me back to my Black studies, like undergrad days, a long time ago.
Mm,
Um, Black psychologist who, in many ways, hit the ground running. Caused a firestorm of controversy in regards to the issuing of the ISIS papers. She was one of those that I would call, we talk about the late 1980s, mid
mhm,
to late 1980s through the early 90s as the golden age of hip hop. Well, Cress Welsing, she was a part of the golden age of Black studies. Um,
mm,
we were an exploding discipline at that time with just pregnant with all these different possibilities, and you see a Cress Welsing come in, and you had to literally pause because number one, she's although she's operating out of Black studies, she's a psychologist, and she's looking at some things that cause me as a historian to really, really, really pause and to really say, "Yo, what is she talking about?"
mhm,
And she was in many ways for a huge swath of Black studies and really Black nationalists. She was the gold standard when it came to explaining
mm,
psychologically what was occurring to us, how it had happened to us, and what we could, in many ways, do to um, to address it and to correct it. She's one of the first that really made you think and realize how damaged we all were, and how even in our everyday life, we were victims of a white world supremacy that tried to capture our minds.
mm, mm. Wow. Awesome. So I'm going to just read a little bit of what they put in here about her.
Hmm.
Frances Cress Welsing, renowned African American psychiatrist and Black liberation activist, was born March 18th, 1935, in Chicago, Illinois. Recognized for her groundbreaking analysis on the psychology of racism, Welsing became a prominent voice within the Black community. As a scholar, she dedicated herself to understanding and challenging the system of white supremacy. Welsing's seminal work, The ISIS Papers, dwells into the psychological effects of racism and presents a thought provoking analysis of the core causes and the consequences of oppression. Through her contributions, Welsing left an indelible mark on the field of psychology, igniting important discussions on race consciousness and empowering generations to challenge systematic prejudice. Um, I also want to take this moment to welcome Twin Pyramid to the program. Peace and blessings, Twin. We're glad you're here, big bro. So the ISIS papers was her, um, big work that
Yeah,
speared her into.
yeah. I mean, the ISIS papers are that was her magnum opus. That was the
Mm,
one. It would be the equivalent to Du Bois's "The Souls of Black Folk," or maybe the Philadelphia Negro. That there's a seminal piece that really legitimates you in the academy, and also, one of the things the ISIS papers did, it brought her legitimacy not only within the academy but also legitimacy amongst the activist nationalist community. She wasn't someone who was in many ways sitting on the sideline pontificating and
Mm-hmm.
talking about, our people's problems. She was, as I said, one of the, although analysis is important, offering solutions and paving a path for us to be able to recognize individually and heal ourselves individually and hopefully collectively is something to hang your hat on. And she was able to do that. She was a part of that cadre. It was truly a glorious moment for Black studies. And I thank the Lord I came up during that moment, because this moment that we're in now, we're more of a insular group that's not necessarily being accessed
Mm-hmm.
by the non-academic community, by the community. You would never, if there was a Cress Welsing um, during that time, you would have never heard of an Umar, because you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about two different levels of analysis and dopeness. And the fact that you do have what I would term these fly by night, throw shit against the wall,
Mm-hmm.
conspiracy theorist scholars whose work is just purely observational. It's not
Mm-hmm.
predicated upon any real research, in depth thinking, or writing. Um, it shows us how far we've gone. We've strayed away from what Black studies initially was and was intended to be and should be to this very day.
Okay, excellent. I don't know, take this time to welcome Brother Willie Rivers to the program. Peace and blessing, Brother Willie. We're glad
Peace.
that you're here.
Peace.
Doc, I just want to go back because I want to make sure people understand what you're saying. You're not saying that Umar is equal to
Oh
Chris
hell
Wilson,
no.
right?
Oh hell no. Hell no. Hell no. No 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 no. Rewind this shit. Hell no. Hell no. I mean, it would be the equivalent of, I don't know. I can't even think of that. That is so far off the mark. I can't even think of it. It would be sort of like, we all know somebody who can sing. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they may have been in the church. That sister can sing. Well, that sister in your local circuit, who's got maybe have some melodic skill, that would be Umar. Cress
Mm-hmm.
Welsing would be Whitney Houston.
Mm-hmm.
There is no, they both sing, I guess, but there's no comparison of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, what we've seen within the movement of Black studies and the upliftment of Black folk, Dr. John Henry Clark said it this way. He said, "What you have now are Hollywood revolutions, where people are saying lights, camera, action. They're not doing the work." And most people, if you go into a restaurant, you go into a bakery, um, and you get something, you have something that you really like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Most people don't recognize that baker was probably there since 2 o'clock in the morning, preparing for when the bakery opened at about 7 or 8 o'clock. Um, that's what scholarship is. That's what being a public intellectual is, or should be. That there's a voluminous amount of work that goes into what it is we do behind the scenes. And Cress
Mm-hmm.
Welsing um, is certainly at the tip top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike
Definitely.
Uma, that's yeah, man, that cat there, boy, that's different. I told you, did I tell you them white folk reached out to me about Umar
Nuh-uh.
years ago? Yeah, yeah, when he was, of course, he's talking about that school,
Mm.
and he had signed some paperwork or something
Mm-hmm.
for the school, and I had wrote a piece in on manhood, race, and culture, and I called it. It was. I used Malcolm's quote. It was a circus with clowns and all. And I talked about Umar in that piece.
Mm-hmm.
Them people, whatever county that structure was in that he had signed paperwork for, they wanted him to pay property taxes or something on it. Okay.
Mm.
And they couldn't get it. They couldn't get a hold of the brother. So they reached out to me and was like, like I knew him. I'm like, no, 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 no. I just wrote about the brother. I don't,
Mhm.
I interviewed him once, but yeah, they actually reached out to me,
Mm. Mm. Wow. You see, Deacon called them Black Revolutionary improvisation.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that because, you know, God bless our people because, God bless our people because even some of our least educated or least savvy, politically savvy
Mhm.
people, they often have the best heart and they know that there's something wrong and they want to do something to help.
Mhm.
And that's where individuals like this slide in. And one of the first principal reason, things that you learn doing this type of work is you don't even take a piece of thread from the people.
Mm.
That you realize, and this is Huey P. Newton's construct, where he says the revolutionary should realize from the beginning that he's a doomed man.
Mm.
He's either going to die on the battlefield trying to execute the revolution and fail, or he'll succeed and no longer be needed by the people.
Mhm.
We're dealing with individuals who are popular because they speak in a rhythmic tone. But when you're talking about content, you're talking about, no, 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 no,
Mhm.
hell no. So no, he's not the equivalent of Frances Cress Welsing.
Mm, mm, mm. Now, with her being a doctor, a psychiatrist,
Hmm.
um, and I'm assuming psychiatrists, they all study the mind and how this works
Uh-huh.
or how that works. Do you think that that is what gave her her greatness, or do you think that because she, really looked in to try to solve the problems or understand the problems that we're going through, that was the push to make her great?
No, I think that a lot of it is timing, um, networking, being in the right place at the right time.
Mhm.
During that golden age of Black studies, we know the big names, but being in that field, I can tell you that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of additional individuals doing the research and doing great research and doing great work um, at the same time. So it's almost like catching lightning in a bottle.
Mm.
And if you catch lightning in a bottle, except for what we're seeing now contemporarily, um, you got to show and prove once you caught that lightning in a bottle. People are now looking at you and your research, and that the saying, the proof is in the pudding.
Mhm.
That's kind of what it is. So I know that her power, having read the ISIS papers, and like I said, man, that's been 30 years ago when I read
Mm.
that, over 30 years ago. Um, you're talking about someone whose theories stood the test of time. And there's something about truth and proper analysis that allows you to flourish. It sounds correct. And
Mhm.
when people poke and prod at it, it holds up to that skepticism, to that critique and what have you. It's and this is the thing that I say about lies and about liars. You don't have to tend to the truth. You got to tend to a lie.
Mhm.
And in tending to a lie, you're going to have to prop that lie up 12, 14 different directions. And it's eventually kind of going to be like a Ponzi or pyramid scheme. It's eventually
Mhm.
going to fall apart. But
Mhm.
truth, no, you set your truth out there, and let that truth stand on its own. Allow people to come and try and debunk it if they so choose. That's her work. And when you're talking about the Black mind, Lord knows you got plenty of room to analyze that. You know, my one of my foundational beliefs is the most significant illness within Black America is mental illness. That's where it begins. You know, so to have psychiatrists, psychologists, people who are working on the mind, we need that, because without a correct mind, you know, there's nothing you can do with people. And Lord knows we've come across those individuals, you know, in our lives.
Mhm. Definitely. I want to read some excerpts from the ISIS papers, Doc, and get your understanding of these quotes. So one thing she says, most important, Black males must help one another to understand that they are being led by the dynamics of white supremacy to inflict extreme damage upon themselves, one another, and ultimately the Black race. Black males must understand that, contrary to what is said, the war being conducted in urban centers is not against drugs, but against Black males for the purpose of white genetic survival.
Yeah.
What's when we look at now with the crime and the killing that's going on, and then the thing she says, that the war is not a war against drugs that they had and said, you know, war against. She said that it is not. It's.
I mean, you don't even have to go to the realm of crime and drugs. You know, hell, go to the gym. Go to the gym, and it'll amaze you. I had a recent interaction with a brother in the gym, and I'm trying to get a locker to put my stuff in. I'm gonna change my clothes, lock my stuff in. And ironically, and this is one of my pet peeves, I got two of them really. One is people who park their car next to my car, and the other one is popping gum. I hate that shit. Okay. But on this occasion, here I end up being the one that was crowding this brother because I chose the locker that was next to his locker out of all the lockers that was there. And here he come, you know, out the shower, you know, and I was like, man, it's me this time. And he said, you one of them that don't like nobody. I said, exactly. So we had probably a 3 to 5 minute banter back and forth, friendly as can be. Okay. Brother gave me a pound after it was over. It was like, yo, man, have a beautiful day. This is like 6 a.m. He looked like he was going to some hospital. He had scrubs on or you know, some medical facility.
Right.
That's what it's supposed to be like. But more times than not, there's a rivalry, a rivalrous tension that occurs amongst Black men, especially Black men who don't know each other. And I liken it, like I do a lot of things, to Richard Wright's The Invisible Man. Not Richard Wright. Who wrote The Invisible Man? The brother that ended up. Who wrote The Invisible Man? You gonna make me? I have to. That'll stick in my head. Ralph Ellison. Ralph Ellison is The Invisible Man. Ellison talks about, and it's a beautiful. It's a stanza that is so beautiful and so appropriate that it's, how can I put it? It makes you, for me as a writer, it makes me want to put my pen down because he sums up what happens to Black men. That when people are looking at you, and in this case is what we're talking about, Black men are looking at, as Du Bois put it, Du Bois says it is a peculiar sensation to view oneself through the eyes of another. That's what the majority of Black folk are doing. We're not looking at Black folk through a Black lens. We're looking at them through a white lens that has been taught to us and poured into our minds. So we're not really seeing them. Let me read this Ellison quote, and tell me if
Okay.
this does not fit what Black men go through. I am an invisible man. Here, I can actually, can I share it? Let me see if I can share this screen. Okay. Yeah, there it is right there. I mean, this, you don't talk about writing. This is writing. This isn't typing. Um, I'm an invisible man. No, I'm not a spook like those who haunted Edgar Allan Poe. Nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms. I am a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids, and I might even be said to possess a mind. I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. Like the bodiless heads you see sometimes in circus sideshows, it is as though I have been surrounded by mirrors of hard, distorting glass. When they approach me, they see only my surroundings, themselves, or figments of their imagination.
Mm,
Indeed, everything and anything except me.
mm,
When you talk about the really conceiving these types of things, that's in the mind as a man think of. And so what Cress Welsing is talking about in that quote that you beautiful quote that you chose, um, they've gotten into our minds. And by getting into our minds, they've actually turned us into adversaries against each other.
mm.
And at the exact same time, because I mean, come on, let's be perfectly honest about this. How many times have we said, man, you know how niggas do?
Exactly. Hmm.
And we're talking about usually some type of entanglement, some ensnarement of some brother that is absolutely ridiculous in regards to the criminal justice system or something happening within our community and what have you. Those things are very believable to us because we've been instructed, taught almost from birth that Black men ain't shit. And these are Black men who are viewing this,
Hmm.
and I can tell you, having a failed relationship and this person actually getting associated with the 100 Black Men of Houston, who invited me down to give a Black History Month speech. And they were like, oh man, brother, this and that and blah blah blah. They said, man, we surprised that you're the way that you are. Because and they
Mm.
named this person and they're like, yeah, she was bad mouthing you this. And I said, now y'all are the 100 Black Men of Houston. My question is, did y'all believe her?
Mm. That's right.
And the truth
Right.
is that they believed her. And the only way that you could get there is if you have some preconceived bias already of how Black men are, and the fact that you are a Black man who's probably been through, a smear campaign yourself. You still can't divest from that, because when you see me, what you're doing is you're projecting, and this is what Ellison is talking about. You're projecting your biases and your viewpoints, your negative viewpoints on me. Now you
Mm.
don't put it on yourself.
Right.
And when I look at you, I'm gonna do the same thing to you.
Mm.
There's no hope for us to ever be able to overcome that. And then the idea of a war on drugs, come on. I would believe that there was a war on drugs in this nation if they arrested Papa Joe Kennedy, dig his old ass up and arrest him full. It is nothing but an excuse to come in and wreak further havoc upon Black and brown people and poor people in general. Okay. So in many ways, that's what she's talking about. The idea that Black men we're far too frequently not helpful for each other. And help does not, it, a sign of help is not agreeing with the exploitation of your people. A sign of help is, yo, man, come on, man, that's foul. That's help.
Hmm.
That's uplifting Black folk. We can't have a demand that black unity means damaging black folk and never being able to denounce it. So yeah, that's what I'm taking from her quote, that she's on it just like Ellison was on it. You know, that these black men that we're talking about are truly invisible.
So, Doc, how does
But wait, hold on. Brother Robert Epps, he reminded me of something that I need to say.
Okay.
She's principally talking about the idea of genetic annihilation of white folk. And the best way to prevent that is to remove black men from the face of the planet Earth. Because if they mate with us, our genetics are dominant enough that we're producing black children. These children are not coming out as white. And so in many ways, what she's talking about is they're trying to prevent the inevitable. And during the 1980s and 1990s, brothers was, you know, they was, it's why you get a film like Spike Lee's Jungle Fever during that period, because interracial relationships were the thing. And it wasn't black women who were crossing that line. It was black men. And the fact that a woman can only produce a child, every 9 months. A brother can produce a child every 9 minutes if he find himself in the right position. And when you have white women who were rebelling against white men, that's what the whole movement of feminism was about. They weren't happy. And so you have a situation where they're bedding down willingly black men and producing black children. And so the war on drugs and the attempt to remove black men from the street is all tied into that. You have to remember that they are genetic recessive. We didn't come out of them. They came out of us, and we can absorb them once again under the right circumstances. So it was in their best benefit to do what they were doing. They were, but the irony of it is that they didn't see the Mexicans coming. And the idea of Catholicism and all of that, numerically, white folk they're going to lose. They're going to, it's a matter of time. I just pray that the Lord, gives me enough days so I can see it.
Definitely. And that actually, you just answered my next question that I was going to go into, dealing with that.
Blame Brother Robert Epps.
And so another quote, she says, the destruction of black males now is indirect, so that the black male victims themselves can be led to participate in and then be blamed for their own mass deaths. So, when do you think that, and I don't want to sound stupid or nothing like that, but when did they get together to say, well, this is the plan of how we're going to control these niggas from A, B, C, D? When was that done? When was that set down?
I don't think that there was a formal meeting, but when you're talking about a system in its evolution or devolution, you learn how to maintain your best interest. You learn how to, what's going to work for you short term and also long term. So what Cress Welsing is talking about, you can trace this all the way back to 1619. I'm only going to deal with the British mainland colonies in talking about this, but the initial individuals who come here into this nation, they're not slaves. They're considered half free, which lets you know that the British have no idea what to do with these black men, these men of African descent. But one thing becomes very clear within years, within almost immediate, it is quite simply, listen, we need to bring some African women up in here so that they can have a partner, which lets you know that they were partnering up with who? White women. And you have this entire, keep in mind that the British system of nobility that we flow out of, that this nation flows out of, says that a child's status follows the father.
Mm-hmm.
In the British mainland colonies, your status follows the mother. So you're going to be a slave, and it is going to be a death sentence even upon the woman, the white woman who beds down and produces a Negro, because that Negro child is going to be free. So that's how systems evolve over time. There was a time where they had this thing called meritorious manumission, where if you did something that was valorous for white folk, look here, you went free. Okay. If the missus and the children got sick, okay, and the doctor couldn't help them, and you had these old African women who knew how to go out there and work them roots and things like that. Well, she saved their life. She would go free. That worked until white folk realized that a whole lot of white folk in the big house was getting sick, and only the cook could save them, because it was the cook who poisoned them. So they did away with meritorious manumission. So you have, and when you have a situation where King Cotton comes into being, it's going to alter the system as well. So the system is altering itself almost immediately to be able to maintain itself and to strengthen itself. It's survival. So when you're talking about what is happening with contemporarily, what's happening with Black boys, deal with the fourth grade syndrome, the third, fourth grade syndrome. Black boys are the same as everybody else until they hit that third, fourth grade period. And it's that moment where they begin to realize that they're males. You look at Mexicans. Mexican boys are hard to teach once they hit that third, fourth grade syndrome, because they are raised up in homes where they see their fathers dominate their mothers. And now they are a male now. And it's hard for a female to handle them. But this system, when you're dealing with Black boys, if you can get them to fall behind reading wise, interest wise in school and what have you, and you're pumping in these images of what it means to be a Black male, which is the equivalent of being, and I love this brother DMX, but being a Rough Rider. Okay. By the time that child, when this process began when he was 7, 8 years old, by the time that child hits 14, 15, number one, his identity and personality are formed, and his value system is formed. And he's facing enormous amounts of peer pressure based upon the idea of, man, why you over there at that school, man, dealing with that sucker shit? Where does that come from? That doesn't come from us. And it's not a situation where they necessarily had to have a meeting about it. They just have the intention of doing it. It's possible to damage someone, especially a child, without having any direct intention of doing it. And that's giving them the benefit of the doubt. I believe that they do have direct intentions in regards to doing it. And you're hard pressed to come across any Black person who graduated from high school who does not have at least some moment where a counselor, for Malcolm, it was Mr. Ostrowski. For me, it was Miss Gardner in the sixth grade. To this day, I cannot break down for you. I can't do sentence structure. Okay. And I wanted to learn how to do sentence structure. I was one of the 4 Black children that they put in the college prep accelerated program. We didn't do that at my elementary school. So my classmates arrived there already knowing how to do it. And I was willing to stay after school, walk home to learn how to do it. Because my mother had told me that they were sending me in there to show them white folk that we were as smart as them. She refused to help me.
What?
I would sit there for hours. Okay, after school, and she'd be doing a grade book or whatever she was doing. She wasn't helping my Black ass at all. And so, you have this accumulation of things, and ultimately you're going to develop a picture, a photo that has people thinking that there are very few resources out here. So you better, as the Goody Mob put it, you better get up, get out, and get something. Okay, in the days of your life getting high, you create this frenetic situation, and we lose because we're going to be hyper aggressive. We're going to be hyper masculine. Okay, we're going to have to wear Paul Lawrence Dunbar's The Mask. We who wear the mask that grins and lies. Black men are masters at never allowing anyone to see their humanity. Because to get respect, where many of them are raised up, you got to be old dog. You can't be Darius from Love Jones. You got to be old dog from Menace to Society. And invariably, you're going to get caught up. And when you get caught up, that justice system ain't going to say you got affluenza. Right. That justice system is going to put your ass down for 17, 18 years.
Wow. Doc, I want us to look at Deacon of Reality comment. He says, I didn't realize how damaged our minds are as a people until I started interacting with my community. The Mexicans make more from, he didn't. Doc, if you can finish what you were trying to say in this bottom part while we discuss the top part.
I mean, the Mexicans make more from nothing than we do. They are a community. I'll tell you what, remember the last time you moved and how difficult it was to get Black folk to come and help you. Nobody's available. Oh man, I had to do, this, and oh man, this came up and blah, 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 blah. Let a Mexican say he moving. Look here, they're gonna break out the barbecue grill. Okay. They're gonna get some of them. What is that they Dos Equis that they like to drink? They're gonna be barbecuing, partying. The women gonna be there fixing food and shit, and the move is gonna be made. I saw a group of Mexicans basically build a house over 3 days. They fixed the plumbing. They moved them people in. They had a great time. And I'm talking about it was 30, 40, 50 of them. Music was blaring, that music, the music they like to listen to, that was blaring. And they made it a community event. And ain't no telling how many of them staying up in there. Our people, the absence of the ability to cooperate is just astounding. Absolutely astounding. And when you really think about those basic, that should be basic.
Right.
We are not we're not necessarily a community,
And Doc, I was thinking, do you think if we as Black men, in our communities got together and had a, like the AA meetings people come to, have a Black men's meeting group where you can just express what you got off, that you're holding in, that's weighing you down. You have the opportunity to speak it.
Modelo. Yeah, that's what they drink, Modelo. Yeah. And that other one with the most interesting man in the world. Yeah.
Do you think that will, slowly but surely begin to turn the process of how Black men see Black men and how they deal with one another?
No, because the thing is that this is an ongoing process, an ongoing injury over and over and over again. And really what you're setting up is a grievance session where brothers are going to talk about, I get hurt and blah, blah. Well, that's not necessarily showing you what to do. That's you expressing what you've been through. Now, is conversation, is getting to know each other a positive thing? Yes, it is. But we got to realize that we got brothers out here who, for one reason or another, are no longer looking at other brothers as brothers. And you need to really deal with that and understand that until they have not only understood what they've gone through, what
Mhm.
they're actively experiencing, and then then have the ability to counter it with something else, and at the exact same time dealing with the reality that in this nation, and this is a very harsh thing for people to really understand, that the majority of black men are not, if you go by the prevailing demands of this society, they're not even marriageable, because you're talking about the two primary qualifications when women are talking about a life partner. They're talking about a man who can protect and provide. Well, majority of black men are not even making $50,000 in a year. And when you have women who are boastful and silly minded and acting as if, quite simply, well, I got it going on, you better get on up and get some, you scrub and blah blah blah. Think about that erosion, and then the fact is that unlike white America, we don't have the ability to employ our hardcore unemployables. We just don't. We have to, unfortunately, we have to go to them pretty much at every turn and beg for material survival, and
Mhm.
that does something to you. And we're at a point where the gender wars between black men and black women are to the point where I don't know how we come back from it.
Wow. So, Brother Robert says in this comment, the problem with us is that we are in love with hell. We glorify our condition constantly in rap music. And then Deke says, facts, Robert, I personally don't listen to any rap music. It's not mature enough for my age. So, with that being in love with hell, and you have the music that's consistently feeding that thought that resonates in the minds of our young people. Um, I don't see an end to that unless we, put an end to it, and that's going to be extreme violence, going into the music studios and doing A, B, C, and D. Um, do you believe that the parents can pull their children away from that? Because I believe you said at one time, Doc, I mean, this was a few years ago, but I believe you had said that it's white children who are buying
Yeah,
these rap albums and stuff.
yeah, yeah. White folk buy more hip hop than black folk do.
So
No
then
doubt,
why
no
is
doubt
it,
about that.
then why are our community feeling the effect of something that we're not the major purchasers of? Why isn't it they feeling the effect, since they're buying it more? Than that would tend to say that they're listening more.
Mhm. Well, I mean, the thing is that if you make a some type of criminal transgression, and you're
Mhm.
white and you have some resources behind you, you go home. If you're black, you go to jail. Um, it is a uneven application of the law that often catches us up, and you can't blame rap music for that. What you can blame rap music for, and let's be very clear about this, that rap music stopped being our owned by us a long time ago. You have to remember that the majority of people didn't expect rap to last until 1986, 1987.
Mhm.
Okay, when it proved that it had some incredible longevity in it. Then you had white folk who really came in, and the first that really, and he doesn't fall into the realm of exploitive white producers and record owners. You got Rick Rubin out of Def Jam, Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons doing Def Jam. But beyond that, you wind up with these ideas of we need a gangster rapper. We need this. We need that. And the reason everyone needed a gangster rapper, everyone needed an Adina Howard, a Lil Kim, what have you, is because it sold. If it didn't sell, No one, they wouldn't produce it, but it's not selling to black folk. Black folk are just numerically, it's impossible for us to be the largest consumers of hip hop. We just aren't. However, Julianne Malveaux, this brilliant economist, black female economist, she was big back in the 90s, 2000s. She said this about skinheads. She said a skinhead ain't nothing but a white boy who could grow some hair and go get a job at a Fortune 500 company. Black folk, we ain't got it like that. Okay. And so what you wind up with is, once again, the codification of a dysfunctional culture, a quote unquote gangster culture that our children are exposed to at the ages of 3, 4, 5 years old. And you said something in your question that I thought was just so appropriate. You asked if parents could pull them away. Yes. Parents can control what their children consume, at least within that house. The problem that we have is, once again, it's a socialization, a cultural problem. That where are the parents? Where are the big mamas at? Where are these women who were really the gatekeepers of who we are and what we do and what we stand for? They're gone. Because when you're talking about a sister having a child at, let's say, 16, 18, and if her child replicates that, she'll be a grandmother by the time she's 35, 36 years old. So you're talking about a situation where these children could possibly get to know their great, 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 great grandmother, who would be 72. What wisdom is coming out of that? Not much at all. So parents, for me, parents are crucial. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Catherine Viola Jones's prayers, all of my grandmother's prayers, and the fact that, I had men in my family. And these were men who, if they saw me out of pocket, or if they saw me someplace that I didn't belong, they made sure I was not there. Because they wanted better for me. And I knew not to buck them. Not at all. I'm trying to get beat up in the middle of the street.
So, Doc, Deacon of Reality asked you a question. He says, Doc, would you agree that rap music has played the biggest role in designing our women today?
The biggest role? No. I wouldn't say it has the biggest role, because I look at all the other things that surround the forming of Black women, from the law, through the economic system, through the promoting of what it means. Wow, a great grandmother that's 38. The promoting of what it means to actually be a woman. There's a lot that goes into that, and why. And this is one of the things that is hard to say. When you're looking at hip hop, let's be very clear about what it is. It's entertainment. It's enjoyable. However, when you combine it with the fact that so many of our Black women are seeking, just like Black men, are seeking an escape from the harsh reality of what it means to be Black, that they want to kick back and they want to go ahead and relax and have a good time and have your psychological release. But the problem with that is, quite simply, that you weren't standing for anything prior to your engagement with hip hop. So what you hear is going to have a disproportionate influence and impact upon how you behave, the words that you use, and who you seek to be. And that's how we've gotten this idea of the quote unquote bad bitch, the boss bitch, and what have you. But I won't lay that solely at the feet of hip hop. There's a lot of things that go into that. And the fact that Black women are often dominated by white society, they've in many ways created these caricatures being entrepreneurs. You sell bundles and you have a lash business. You're not really an entrepreneur. That's not really a business. But
Mm.
black women have been influenced and impacted by hip hop music. And but I would say that reality TV today is more damaging to black folk, to black women, than hip hop is.
Doc, at what point did the criminalization of blackness you think really took full steam here in America? And can you point to a time when it left America and became this worldwide concept of agreement?
You know, the criminalization of blackness occurred in 1865 with the passage of the 13th Amendment. You know, most people talk about the idea of the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. It does abolish slavery, but it abolishes slavery except for in the case of criminals. And if nothing else, this nation was built on our labor. And so when freedom comes, these white folk, they have the land, but they can't work it. They don't know how to work it. There's a genius to growing something. You got to know something about it. They don't. So you have the institution of sharecropping. And if you didn't want to sharecrop, they have vagrancy laws. Get caught down here without a job, you go on a parchment farm, you go into the chain gang. So 1865 is the reason why they held out to talk about we're going to abolish slavery, but not if you're a criminal. They criminalize blackness. They're locking up 6, 7, 8-year-old kids in penitentiaries because they stole a hat. They rode a horse. So the criminalization of black folk is early on, you know, very early. You know, you don't have a moment of black freedom without the criminalization of blackness. They happen simultaneously. And you got to remember that the criminalization of black folk with the 13th Amendment predates the founding of the Ku Klux Klan in Pulaski, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
So the U.S. government was ahead of the Klan in regards to that.
Wow. Wow. I hope y'all got what Doc just said. For sure. I hope y'all picked that up. And I'm looking at Deke's comment, and I know you are a hip hop.
I love hip hop.
Genius with this, but is hip hop and rap two different things?
I would
most
argue
people would think that it's the same.
I would argue that it would be the difference between heavy metal and rock and roll. They're two different things. Wow. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
Hip hop is about lyrics. It's about MCing. You know, go back and listen to, you know, Rakim is, you know, still in my top 2. You know, and you know, I'm glad I listened when my father was rapping to me, because back in the days they lived in caves, exiled from the original man. They strayed away. You know, today, you know, you can listen to a figure like Big Crit, you know, gave us this beautiful, you know, almost scriptural lamentation towards his grandmother, you know, a love letter to his grandmother who had just passed, you know. So we still got some brothers who are out here doing it lyrically, you know. It's just that if you're not steeped in hip hop culture, you're not going to hear the true hip hop artist. You know, who's the sister? Rhapsody. Oh my God. How do you know Jesus? You know, you listen to Rhapsody, it's almost as if you're listening to God whispering in your ear. You know, that sister is so dope. You know, so we have, I think it's, you know, we fall into when we're not a part of a culture, and we're not a part of that culture anymore. I don't consider myself, I love hip hop, but I don't consider myself a part of that culture anymore. And I can point to the moment when my old ass was kicked out, and it was when Bone Thugs and Harmony was out. I know what them Negroes were saying. Even though I got a chance to to meet and kind of be in the presence regularly of a busy bone under some different circumstances, but my younger cousins, Malika, Jamila, Rashida, Kareem, every single word. They was, and I was like, damn, it's over, ain't it? Yeah. It sounded like them brothers was making animal noises to me. The game had, and there comes a moment where you got to just realize, and I hope that Black politicians and members of Congress are listening. There's a time when your time is up. You got to move your old ass out the way, okay, and let some new folk take over. So it's one of those where if you're not immersed in a culture, and I do my best to not get involved in generational warfare, you would know about a Rhapsody. You're not going to know about a Big Crit. You're not going to know about a J. Cole. You're not going to know about the more cerebral lyrics that a Lil Wayne puts out, where he's really talking about some serious stuff, some weighty stuff, but you're also so distant from that culture that what those who are covering it, most notably white media or popular media, what they're putting out, that's where you're getting your information from. And just imagine if you were just getting your information from those outlets about Black folk, you might go home and kill your damn self tonight. Become a modern day Clayton Bigsby. And the second part of your question about outsiders looking at it, that's where they're getting their information from. Hip hop is America's foremost nuclear bomb. It is not an atomic bomb. It's a nuclear bomb. When I was in Amsterdam riding the train, I'm looking at graffiti. And I'm like, even the European has had to bow at what these Black and brown kids created in the South Bronx. Okay. But it comes at a cost of where you're getting your information from. Because many Africans have this crazy perception, number one, that all Americans are rich, and number two, all of us can rap and sing and play basketball, because they got their information from the same place that white folk got theirs, and they haven't touched us.
Wow. I want to welcome Brother Gregory Calloway to the program. Peace and blessings, Brother Gregory. We're glad you're here. We're going to turn and look at a few videos from Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and come back and analyze it and talk about it.
All right, let's do it.
So let's see.
This edition of Black Journal is dedicated to the Miami Times, a member of the Crusading Black Press, serving Miami, Florida, the 17th largest Black community in the United States. Our theme on this series is Black Centennial, but we really don't mean 100 years of living. What we have in mind is the Black presence, yesterday and today. And although our theme is historical and contemporary, this edition will emphasize the present-day issues of Afro-Americans. This special edition will feature two contemporary spokespersons, Dr. Frances Welsing, a well-known psychiatrist whose psychiatric theories and views on a number of topical issues have had a significant impact on Afro-Americans. She is the author of the Cress Theory of Color Confrontation. And Melvin Van Peebles, director and producer of various stage plays and movies. He is the author of a newly published book entitled The True American. Our first guest is Dr. Frances Welsing. Joining me in the questioning is Richard Prince from the Washington Post. Mr. Prince has the first question.
Yes, Dr. Welsing, it's been about a year ago since you were dismissed from Howard University. And at the time, I recall you charged that your Cress theory, which in brief holds that whites are inferior to blacks because of the lack of melanin, was responsible for that dismissal. And I'm wondering whether you still believe that and what proof you have of that.
Well, Dick, I do believe it. I was dismissed from Howard, fired from Howard in June 1975. In November 1974, while still at Howard, I heard a rumor that I was going to be blocked from promotion and tenure because of my views, not because of my academic work. And I went immediately to the Dean of the College of Medicine, Dr. Marion Mann, and I asked him promotion and tenure because of my views. And Dr. Mann responded, to be frank with you, Dr. Welsing, this paper that you wrote, and I said, the Cress theory of color confrontation, he said yes. He went on to say that it did not make sense for me to say that white people were envious of black people because white people lack skin pigmentation. And we went on from that point. But let me make one correction. My theory does not say that whites are inferior to blacks. I don't say that. I say that whites feel that they are inferior because they cannot produce skin pigmentation and because their status as, I say, a variant of albinism is genetic recessive to blacks, and they can be genetically annihilated by non-white people, that this is what causes that sense of inadequacy, that they have built a total behavioral system that is a compensation. White supremacy is a compensation for a sense of white genetic inadequacy.
I see. One other follow-up on that, and that is what background in genetics do you have to enable you to document that theory?
Well, I'm a medical doctor, and all medical doctors receive or take courses in genetics. And this is very, very basic genetics. And it not only is very basic genetics, this is common lay knowledge. And we hear it, the dominance, the genetic dominance of black over white is heard in the expression, one drop of black blood makes you black. In other words, if you were to relate to a white female, the product of that relationship would be an individual that is identifiable as what is called non-white. They would have something, I mean, the curliness of the hair, the darkness of the skin would make the child look more like you than like the mother.
I see.
Dr. Welsing, your theory to me seems to infer some innate behavior on the part.
I want to stop it right there, Doc, and just ask you a few things that I'm looking at this and realizing. Now, this was done back in '76 when we had Black Journal. Then at some time, of course, he changed it from Black Journal to Tony Brown's Journal. But there was I guess, a agreement, maybe not verbally agreed, but there was an agreement of the way we wore our hair. Brothers, fros, sisters with the fro. There was that agreement. There was that tangible likeness in the way that, we wore our hair. My first question to that is, did that mean anything? Did it represent anything? And if so, what did it? You on mute, Doc.
Of course, it means something. Your physical appearance is the first thing that people see. Now, as to if it has any roots or depth beyond that is something that could be in many ways debated, and it would really only be able to be answered on a person-by-person basis. This is, in many ways, you're talking about the 1970s. So we're at the very, very end of the Black Power era. Say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. So that's coming from that. If you go back and you look at the individual that I say is the physical presence of what Black Power meant, if you're looking at imagery, Eldridge Cleaver. Eldridge Cleaver wore a goatee. And you have to remember that this is also on the heels of Black folk being kind of told to conform. So for a Black man to wear an afro, or a Black woman to wear an afro, and especially for Black men to wear a goatee, was shouting a political stance, militancy, because it was a conscious decision to go ahead and do that. It was considered something that was risque, something that was anti-establishment in your physical appearance. And in many ways, we've seen a full circle of that with brothers and sisters having the dreads and the twist and what have you, so much that they had to create the Crown Act, to protect them in a white workspace.
Wow. And Brother Robert called it was called it a natural.
The
It was
natural, yeah, that's what they call it, a natural.
um, and so in terms, then this was a rejection
Mhm.
of white society in the way that they had positioned us.
Yes, yes. It you know the you know when you really think about much of what Black folk do is often not running towards something; it's repudiating something. It's kind of like the upcoming presidential election. Many people are going to vote for Joe Biden, but I think that more people are going to cast votes against Trump. If you understand what I mean. I mean, the idea that this is the white standard. Well, we're going to be, we can't be troublesome and worrisome in any other area and keep our jobs. So let us do it with our physical appearance. Let us, when we buy a suit, let us let us tweak it a little bit. Let us show them how we do it. Let us get our vine together. So yeah, it means something. You know, it really does. It means something for those who are at the forefront of it. Now, many of the people who are going to do it, they're not politicized. They're just following a fad.
Mm. Wow, excellent. And then the next question I had, Doc, this first reporter that asked her that dumbass question about, being fired from Howard and all that shit.
Hey, brother. Tenure and promotion, brother.
Yeah.
Tenure and promotion.
Do you would think though that on, Black Journal that you wouldn't, at least I would think you wouldn't ask the sister no damn question like that. And that's gonna be your first question that you come out the box with. You know, do you think that
Well,
self?
but I mean, but issuing that question allows her to explain what happened. So I don't think that the brother, I give the brother benefit of the doubt. Um, I've done that before. In many ways, give you a underhanded softball toss so that you can speak your piece, because you don't know if she was ever allowed to discuss why she ended up outside of Howard. And trust me when I said, we were just the last show when I was talking about having to go through tenure review, post tenure review. All those things are political. If they don't want you there, you're not going to be there. And I can tell you just kind of my personal thing. It was my white colleagues who maintained my position.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the second thing, she says that she didn't say that white folks are inferior. She said white folks feel they feel that they are inferior. But the actual fact of the matter, though, in terms of skin and DNA of what she's talking about, they are inferior, correct?
Well, I mean, it would depend upon what your evaluation criterion is. That's a very difficult, thing to answer. What is your evaluation criterion? What are you using to substantiate that they're superior or they're inferior? That would be for geneticists to really deal with. However, the insinuation of white inferiority in that world is scandalous. And you have to remember, you're talking about Howard University. Howard University is probably the most well-funded HBCU alive. It sits right there in the nation's capital. They have a tremendous lobby, that almost guarantees their funding. So to have someone on your faculty like Frances Cress Welsing, who is saying these types of things, well, she's going to jeopardize bringing the entire house down. Because there are going to be people who are going to say, well, we're not going to fund that. They got that Cress Welsing over there. So in many ways, she has to be sacrificed.
Wow. All right, we'll pick up with the interview.
Part of a human being because they are, quote, black or white. Would you agree or disagree that the terms black and white are not genetic definitions? And if they are not genetic definitions, then how could your theory be true?
Well, wait a minute. When you say genetic definitions, I'm not quite sure what you say, but for the sake of time, the factors that determine whether we're going to have skin pigmentation or whether we lack skin pigmentation is based on genes. In other words, you have genes that determine the quantity of melanin pigment that is going to be produced in your skin, in your eyes, in your hair. If you have a gene, a mutation towards an inability to produce that pigment, that is also genetically determined. And that is at least within the context of the Western world or the white supremacy culture. The dominant classification of people, not as determined by Frances Welsing, but as determined by white people themselves, is your classification. Either you are white or you are classified as non-white. This is on your birth certificate. This is on every paper of identification that you have. And this focus on skin coloration, I maintain, is based on the awareness on the people who are now in power that they are a minority. The white group represents a minority in the world population. And the color focus is something that is a psychological, I say a psychological necessity based on a genetic reality. So I don't know if this gets to your question. Now, any other thing that one might say that results from the absence of pigment, I mean, that's another discussion. I don't know whether you want to go into that.
Well, following that logic, then, would it not be accurate to say that there would be a difference psychologically in light-skinned blacks from dark-skinned blacks?
Well, psychologically, yes, and I think that we are all aware of that. Under white supremacy, the conditioning has been the closer you are to white, the more acceptable you are. So that, for example, all of us learned as we were growing up in the black community, if you are black, stay back. If you are brown, stick around. If you are yellow, you're mellow. And if you're white, you're right. And the appreciation of an individual, even within the black group itself, was very often based on the relative absence of skin pigmentation. And even within families, children thought that they were ugly if they were darker. And families, parents have said that to children. Even now, people want to know when a baby is just born in the hospital, some of the first questions that are asked by the black parents about the child or the black family members, is it light skin and does it have straight hair? To know how much value we're going to put on this new baby. Because within the framework of the culture in which we live, the closer you are to white, the more you're considered beautiful, and perhaps under some circumstances, the more opportunities you will have.
Well, Dr. Welsing, if it is true that you were dismissed from Howard because of your views on that subject, what would you say then of the application and the implications for academic freedom at Howard University?
Well, I say that, first of all, Howard University is a black university in name only. In other words, those who fund an institution within the framework of a political system, those who fund an institution determine what is going to be done within the framework of that institution. And so although Howard University is referred to as a black university and the majority of the student body is black and the majority of the faculty is black, still it is possible, I say it is possible, that those people who control the purse strings can say, we do not like such and such an ideology or philosophy that is coming out of this center. If this continues to come out, then we will not give you funds for building and we will not give you funds to continue the function of your center. Now you make your choice.
Well, are you saying that this happened in your case, or was it simply the case of one dean saying this to you? I mean,
well, let's put it this way. I can only suspect that it happened if you ask me to prove it, because I will say that the same funding forces or sources, if they said, well, we like very much what Dr. Welsing is doing. First of all, no one has been able to disprove what she's saying. That we think this is very interesting. I mean, whether the theory is correct or incorrect, it's a valuable idea to discuss, or it is being discussed a lot. We're glad to have that debate going on in an academic institution. We think that that individual ought to stay there. Then that individual would be there.
What about the Board of Trustees and the president of the university? What have they said about what happened to you?
Well, the Board of Trustees and the president of the university concurred in the decision to dismiss me, despite the fact that the chairman of my department and the executive committee in my department recommended that I be promoted and given tenure. Also, the Committee on Appointments and Promotions within the College of Medicine also recommended that I be promoted and given tenure.
So what do you do now then? What is your next step?
Well, right now we have been involved in several grievance committee hearings, and I have a lawyer, and the university has a lawyer, so I don't know what the outcome of it is going to be. But my charge is that I was removed from the university as a breach of my academic freedom because the discussion centered around the paper that I wrote, and that someone disagreed, namely the dean. I mean, he's the one who made the statement to me that he disagreed with the content of the theory. Although I told him I had many documents, I have many, many letters from white people in this area of the world and in foreign countries who have written to me and said, yes, I have always wished that I had more melanin. And I said that to the dean. I don't ask black people what white people think about themselves. I ask white people, or they will tell me what they think about themselves. And anybody who watches the phenomena of sun tanning, millions and millions and millions and millions of white people, the minute the sun is out, lying in the sun, taking the chance of getting skin cancer to get dark, cannot tell me that white people are satisfied with the way that they look.
Dr. Welsing, you've charged, in a sense, that the climate of academic freedom at Howard University is threatened. The Washington Post has said in an editorial that the leadership of Howard University was wavering. Therefore, it was not stable, and Howard really didn't have a definite sense of mission. Now, do you feel, in the context of those two statements, that the era of academic freedom or the climate of academic freedom at Howard includes whites who teach there, or do you feel it's basically relegated to the blacks who have theories, quote, that might be controversial or unacceptable?
Well, Tony, I don't want to get off into comparing whether it applies to whites or whether it applies to blacks, you know, whether whites can say what they want in Howard and whether blacks cannot. I will simply say, and I honestly do not fault the leadership at Howard University within a certain sense. In other words, we are an oppressed people in a power system that I maintain supports white domination. If you are going to work and function within that context, you have to go by the rules that have been set up. Now, this may not have anything to do with truth. It may not have anything to do with justice. It may not have anything to do with reality. But I say that the pressure is there on the leadership in so-called black institutions, we might even say as far as television programs are concerned. If you are going to say the wrong thing that makes the people who control the purse strings unhappy, then chances are that you are not going to have that opportunity very long. If what you are saying is conceived of as a threat to the status quo, or if what is being taught or what is being propagated in some way will change the minds of the listeners so that people begin to behave in a different way because they begin to think of things in a different perspective or from a different angle.
Well, my question in asking for a comparison of academic freedom vis-a-vis black professors or white professor referred specifically to a case of a white professor from South Africa named Rubin, who has been dismissed, qualifiedly dismissed or whatever it is from the university. And basically because the students did not believe he had the right to say what he wanted to say at the university, which parallels, if I'm following you correctly, the fact that you are alleging that you have been fired, in fact, because you had the temerity to say theoretically what you said.
Well, let me just go, I look at that particular case, there's the case of Dr. Rubin, who the students had charged that he was negligent in his duties towards the student body. Now, all these charges have been washed away, but this was essentially, as I understand it, what happened. They alleged that he had done a couple of things that some people had said were racist, and also that he had been negligent in his responsibilities. Well, when that happened, all of the newspapers that are white owned and supported went to his defense. How dare Howard University remove this individual who was an anti-apartheid, meaning an anti-white supremacy, anti-racist, took an anti-racist position in South Africa, that this man has, in quotes, demonstrated his interest in black people and non-white people. Now, I just looked at that case in this way. Here is an individual that, as far as the media in the District of Columbia is concerned, they defended this man because he had taken an anti-racist, anti-apartheid position in South Africa. But there's Frances Welsing, who has written a paper and a theory on white supremacy, has to be dismissed from the same institution because I consider myself a counter-racist, a person who is moving against an unjust and negative force of white supremacy. But I have to be dismissed because I wrote a theory that was against white supremacy. But an individual who is classified as white, who took a position so-called an anti-white supremacy position in South Africa, he is defended as being someone who should be at a black institution, defended at least by the media. Do you see what I'm saying? Because one of the papers in Washington, the Evening Star, in an editorial said, well, apparently Howard University has a small group of racists, meaning black people who are supposed to be against white people, you know, faculty and students who are anti-white, and now it's time to weed out all of the other black people who have an anti-white position. Now, this is said in a city in which there are two major white universities who have very, very small black student bodies and very, very small percentages of blacks on their faculty. But there's no examination or no gross criticism of the white dominance and presence at the two white institutions, but let's weed out if there are other black people who in any way can be looked at as being against whites, well, then attack that black center. And it's a lot of chaos and confusion, but I think that if it is understood the dominant dynamic in this area of the world, the dominant dynamic that is going on throughout the world is white domination. I don't think that anyone can refute that. The persons who have the power in the world today, all of it is in the hands of people who themselves classify themselves as white as opposed to non-white. That is where the power is. If we understand that, we can understand everything else.
We have time for one short question and one short response.
Oh, I see. Well, this was going to be longer, but anyhow, you said that the operating dynamic is racism in essence.
White supremacy.
White supremacy.
Yes.
Do you make any allowances for economic domination or any class differences and
Okay, very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The system of white supremacy is a dynamic that encompasses all areas of people activity. That means economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
Mm-hmm.
You have a behavioral system that is in all of those areas of activity seeking to establish white supremacy. I say that the class positions in that society are white upper class, white middle class, white lower class, and then non-white, non-class, irrespective of income. Income is not power.
Thank you very much. I'm
Okay.
sorry to have to interrupt, but we'll have to thank you so much, Dr. Welsing, for being on Black Journal. This
Okay, so that was the first video. Doc, now it seems to me, and I want to go back to this point that I just asked you about, because listening to what she said, sound like to me that she was saying that black genes are dominant, and that in those terms that we are better than them. You're on mute, Doc.
Yeah. You know, my thing is that depending upon what you consider to be better or dominant, superior, you know, what is the evaluation criterion? Now, the evaluation criterion is quite simply that white folks are genetically recessive.
Mm-hmm.
Then black genes are superior, if that's what your qualifications are. If that's what you're talking about, then that's true. That's what she's saying.
Mm-hmm.
That in many ways, much of what you're seeing with this the operation and the mechanization of white world supremacy, you're talking about them trying to survive. And a part of them trying to survive is protecting their gene pool. Because if they allow their gene pool to be invaded, integrated sufficiently, they will no longer exist.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible for them to literally no longer exist on the face of the planet Earth. That's not possible for black folk.
And since that, why do you think, or do you think that that's something hard for black people to say, especially in the presence of white folk? you know, because they taught this, you know, so I call it fake white supremacy because they're not supreme, you know. Why is it hard, even in you know, as she was saying, even in academia, you know, where you're supposed to be able to have these type of conversations amongst people who, you know, in that type of intellectual realm and not be offended, but have that conversation. But they're intellectual cowards. They don't want to touch that conversation.
Well, I mean, you know, you look at my situation that we talked about last show. I'm under review right now under a complaint that was brought by black people, young black girls, 18, 19, 20 years old. There are serious consequences to go against the trend. You can call it cowardice or what have you, but her ass got put out of Howard. My ass is under investigation right now. You get what I'm saying? Right. And now from the outside in, people can say, "Oh no, that's unfair. That's in block." Well, they're still doing it. It still occurred. And the message is sent is very clear that if you want promotion, if you want tenure, you don't act like these two wild Negroes right here. Now, all of this about you should be able to have intellectual discourse and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, right. Yeah. You believe that shit you want to, you won't be up in there long, you know, and that's really what it comes down to. You know, you're not talking about a place where intellectual freedom is reigns. It just doesn't, you know. And those of us who are inside the academy, every one of us will tell you that, especially if you can get us along, we'll tell you that there are certain questions you don't ask, certain things that you don't say, because the moment that you know, your number comes up, you're probably going to be up out of there. You know, I know a brother who got ran out of off the North American continent. You know, he's somewhere over in Europe teaching to get away from the harassment. You know, and so when you're talking about, you know, you call it fake white world supremacy. No, it's white world supremacy. That shit is real, because not only are they able to do it to you, they have black folk who will do it to you. This happened at Howard University. They ran her ass up out of there. That white boy got to stay at Howard University. You know, and it has nothing to do with right or wrong. It has nothing to do with morality. It has everything to do with the harsh, undeniable fact that black folk don't have institutions that are capable of or willing to or are structured to go to bat for black folk. They don't. What we do is we you know, you get out there, you realize you on your own, or you're going to end up being sacrificed. You know, that's just what it is.
Crazy. We're going to look at another video where Dr. Frances is debating William Shockley, 1974. Let's check this out. And Doc, if you see
implications of what he is doing.
If you see a point that you want me to stop, so you want to, you know, interject, just let me know.
Okay.
Are no different than the propaganda campaign that Hitler and his Nazi unit carried on in Germany that ended up eliminating 6 million Jewish people. Now, what is most interesting is that Hitler said the very same thing. He said, number one, that the Jews were genetically inferior to the Aryans.
If one believes that the German people would have tolerated the concentration camps and the gas chambers, if news media, like the programs that Mr. Brown is setting on, if those people were willing to bring discordant views out into the open, I don't believe the concentration camps and the gas chambers could have continued to exist in Germany.
Back in the 70s, a man named Dr. William Shockley, a noted scientist, embarked upon the mission of proving to the world that black people are genetically inferior, without, I might add, the benefit of any formal background in genetics. He became front-page news and won headlines with his controversial views. On campus after campus, unrest followed his every visit. My position then and now is that if a supremacist cannot be rationally debated, perhaps he has a point. After the debate you're now going to see, Dr. Shockley went back into oblivion. I don't claim that the 1973 interview did it alone, but I am of the opinion that it helped. I'm Tony Brown. In a moment, racial superiority with Dr. William Shockley. We have two very prominent educators, scholars on Black Journal tonight, and we feel that it is important to defend the First Amendment rights of all Americans. Dr. William Shockley, one of our guests, has had quite a difficult time speaking at some universities, and particularly some Black college students do not agree with his theories. On Black Journal, we feel that Dr. Shockley's rights in the First Amendment area are parallel to Black people's rights. That is, that Dr. Shockley must have a platform for his views if Black people are to have a platform for their views. Dr. Frances Welsing, on the other side, has difficulty in expressing her views on legitimate mass media outlets because many whites do not agree with her theory of genetics. Now let's find out what the controversy is about. Dr. Shockley, please give us the benefit, basically, of what your theory is.
My principal point, Mr. Brown, is not so much a theory of black-white differences, but is summed up in one word, which is the theme of my appearance on your program and my efforts, and the word is dysgenics. And dysgenics means effectively downbreeding, retrogressive evolution. And I fear that this is worst for the Black community, and I particularly welcome an opportunity to appear on Black Journal just for these reasons. And let me say also that when I first met Dr. Welsing, it was not Black students who were disrupting, but white students. And Dr. Welsing made a very sincere and I thought extremely effective effort, a well-planned effort. It was not effective with these white students at Staten Island Community College, so I would have a chance to speak. In fact, I think they prevented her from saying what she wanted to say when she was trying to gain me a platform. So my main theme is that we have problems that we should face, and we should look at connected with dysgenics, and I welcome any opportunity I have to bring this out so that people can look at it and worry about it.
Dr. Shockley, you are accused of having a theory that is a white racist theory. How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond to that by saying that I've considered whether or not I am a racist. Racist is an epithet that used to damage my self-esteem, but it doesn't anymore. I feel it's untrue. If you look in the dictionary as to what racist means, it means emotional feelings, irrational feelings associated with fear and hate. If I really had those, I don't think I would be here this evening. I feel that what I'm engaged in is a demand for diagnosis, and I'd like to say some more about this chart, which we'll come to probably later, which shows the disproportionate rates of reproduction for the least effective elements of the Black community. I'd like to say more about that than we should in just this brief introduction. But I think there is another word that better describes what I'm involved in, and that word is raceology, which means a scientific analysis of racial differences. And I have a faith that reason is a good thing, and I feel, as you do about the First Amendment, but maybe with a slightly different emphasis. I think the really important thing about the First Amendment is it is a way of guaranteeing a high likelihood that truth will emerge as a result of conflicting ideas being expressed, and I have a thesis and a basic belief that truth is a good thing and will be of benefit to man.
Thank you. Dr. Frances Welsing, give us the benefit of your theory, please.
Well, my theory was, I wrote the paper in 1969. I wrote a paper called The Cress Theory of Color Confrontation and Racism. And the sole reason behind writing that paper was an attempt to understand the behavior of white people in relationship to all people of color, every place in the world, black, brown, red, and yellow people. And the paper was presented to the Americans at the National Medical Association, the section on psychiatry in neurology, because back in 1969, the Black Caucus in the American Psychiatric Association, we had said that racism, and when we talk about racism, we're talking about the white supremacy behavior of white people. that racism was the #1 mental health problem in the nation, and it was the #1 cause of other mental health problems. And I wanted to understand what this thing of racism really is all about, because it's the thing that has caused woe and misery and suffering for the vast majority of the people on this planet that are classified as non-white. And in my attempt to understand why the necessity of white people to keep saying that white is superior and that the condition of non-white is inferior, and the more I thought about it, in conjunction with an idea that a friend of mine had, that racism was a worldwide behavioral system for the maintenance of white supremacy by a small minority of people, I put those ideas together with what we know about genetics, what we know about the condition of skin whiteness itself. The condition of skin whiteness is the genetic inability to produce skin pigment called melanin. This is a genetic recessive trait. It is a genetic deficiency state, not as defined by Frances Welsing, but defined by geneticists and dermatologists, that the inability to produce the skin pigment of melanin or melanin pigment is described as albinism. And I think that white people, even though most white people are not consciously understanding their problem in genetics, they are certainly aware that they are genetically dominated by people of color. That's why it was a statement, one drop of black blood makes you black, because people of color have the genetic capacity to annihilate white people. And so unless white people control the reproductivity of people of color, then we can postulate that perhaps one day there won't be any white people. And I think that the very survival of white people necessitates that they project genetic inferiority on people of color, because it is they who really are aware that they are genetic recessive and perhaps genetically inferior to people of color. And I am not saying this to call the condition of skin whiteness to say, well, no, white people are inferior. I'm not saying it for that purpose, but I think that it is of prime importance for the majority of people in the world to understand why it is that white people have to, the effective majority, large numbers of white people, have to move in a hostile and an aggressive way against people of color, and have to constantly focus on it's you who's genetically inferior, because they realize that there's something wrong with their genetic status. Now,
May I take a call?
Oh, sure,
All right.
please.
Let me, so that, because we have a number of calls, and we'll see what the public wants to find out also. Just 1 second. Hello, go ahead, please. You're on Black Journal.
I would like to ask the question, why does the doctor feel that his theory, Dr. Shockley, why does he feel that your theory is correct?
Well, let me say that's a long question. Let me point out one aspect. I mean, it's a question that calls for a very long answer. I think I might just at this point say that in a time like 1 hour, we may expose a problem and encourage thinking about it, and this is a very valuable thing. But to cover either Dr. Welsing's views or mine, and let me say here are, just to show that these things exist, is a pamphlet that she was good enough to give me some time ago.
This one's upside down.
Well, that one's upside down.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Right.
And this is one of my own. It's actually a collection of a debate.
The imperatives of ethnic education is yours.
This is the issue of the journal. Mine was, the title of my paper is somewhat different from this, but I want to say that, speaking for myself, if people would like to write to me at Stanford University, I have a post box there, Post Box S, which is the same as Shockley and Stanford. I will try to supply more information, and I'm sure Dr. Welsing will say what she can do about telling people how to reach her pamphlet. Okay. But now let me say this chart that I held up a moment ago is very important in respect to this question of why I think there may be what proves a basic difference. But I'm going to say that if there were not a basic difference in intellectual capacity in the past, there probably will be a basic difference between black and white intellectual capacity in the future, simply because of the reproduction patterns. And these are Census Bureau data, and this is the most threatening aspect. And what it indicates is that for the black women of the lowest intellectual social class, which are rural farm women, generally the education is least, the average number of children is 5.4. For women with college degrees, it's 1.9. And so this is definitely unfavorable. It is reproducing far more at the bottom end and not enough to keep even at the top end.
Dr. Shockley, can
For
you
whites, let me
explain?
just finish this. For whites, the numbers are also in this direction, but nowhere nearly as severe.
Dr. Shockley, I think that in all fairness, you should explain to the audience why it is that you have, first of all, you have a very large segment of the black population who are on farms, who are deprived in cities. Why don't you explain at the time that you're showing this, who is keeping black people in a situation like they're in? I mean, it could be, you could turn it around the other way, where you could have very large numbers of black people who are exposed to educational opportunities like white people, who are exposed to housing, who are exposed to health facilities. Why don't you explain that at the same time that you put figures like that?
I'm sure you would explain it,
No, but I
Dr.
think
Welsing,
it's important
but
in
one must say first things first. And you've raised the basic question there, and that is whether the disadvantages are primarily a lack of opportunity or whether they are primarily a basic genetic difference. And let me mention one thing, which is that in certain areas, there is no doubt about black superiority. Blacks are superior in visual acuity, and they're superior in a systematic way. Now, I don't expect that people will understand the details of this, but I simply want to show that quantitative work can be done. This happens to be a research job of my own, and what it shows, because these points that you see here lie on a line, which is not the central line, but they lie systematically on a line. What it says is that so far as visual acuity is concerned, blacks are systematically better than whites. It's as if their bell-shaped curve, their distribution curve, were pushed upwards compared to whites for visual acuity, or at least for the avoidance of bad eyesight, such that if the same shift occurred for IQ, it would mean that the average IQ distribution would be up by 9 points rather than down by about 15 points, which is the typical average.
Dr. Shockley, visual acuity is probably something that the system of white supremacy has not necessarily seen the need to affect the environment that black people are in so that it will alter the fact that they have visual acuity that is superior to whites. The fact of visual acuity is not attacked in the same way as educational opportunity and job performance is attacked. And I think that
it's evidence for a genetic difference, in my
well, you see
opinion.
what I'm saying? There might be many, many more genetic differences where people of color appear superior.
If I may, we have a number of people, and we'd like to get to as many as possible. If you could make your answers, not to compromise your explanation, but if you could make your answers as succinct, I would appreciate it, because we'd like to involve the public as much as we can. One moment, please. You're on Black Journal. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was wondering if Dr. Shockley could explain the basic difference between the course he is taking in explaining white supremacy and the course that Hitler took during the Nazism reign.
Thank you.
Well, there are enormous differences. In fact, the lesson to be learned from Nazi history is frequently very misunderstood. And it is a lesson which Mr. Brown has told us about earlier. It's the First Amendment. It's not that eugenics is intolerable. Actually, the eugenic programs, which are the opposite of dysgenics, eugenic programs are not inconceivable. They're not inhumane. Denmark has been carrying out programs with strong eugenic implications for maybe 30 years. And it's important to note that since World War II, Denmark's per capita homicide rate dropped and is now approximately 1/20th. That is, the number of deaths of probability of being killed in a year by a violent homicide is roughly the order of 100 times less for young Danes than it is for young American blacks. Now, but the lesson, let me say what the lesson of Nazi history we have in this country, and it will protect us. It's just the thing that makes this program possible. The First Amendment, which allows freedom of speech. If one believes that is not the right answer, then one has to be one of the most anti-German racists that can be. If one believes that the German people would have tolerated the concentration camps and the gas chambers, if news media, like the programs that Mr. Brown is setting on, if those people were willing to bring discordant views out into the open, I don't believe the concentration camps and the gas chambers could have continued to exist in Germany.
I'd like to comment because I'd like to say that I don't think that there's a major difference between what Dr. Shockley is doing. I don't think that Dr. Shockley is fully aware of what he is doing and why he is doing what he's doing. But the long-range implications of what he is doing are no different than the propaganda campaign that Hitler and his Nazi unit carried on in Germany that ended up eliminating 6 million Jewish people. Now, what is most interesting is that Hitler said the very same thing. He said, number one, that the Jews were genetically inferior to the Aryans. Number two, he was aware that the Semites had genetically dominant material, genetic material to the Aryans. And if we begin to understand the way that people who were in Europe at the time that the Semites arrived from Africa, when the Semites arrived in Europe from Africa, they were people who had substantial amounts of color and who had very kinky hair because they were from the continent of Africa. And the Europeans, the white people who were there, had a reaction, a color reaction to the Semites that is no different than the reaction and the concern on the part of people who are white in this area of the world or any other area of the world to people who have the genetic capacity to produce color, who can genetically annihilate their position. And I think it's very, very important. Even though Dr. Shockley, I am convinced that Dr. Shockley believes that he is perhaps elevating science with all of his charts and all of his figures, but he doesn't understand the things that propel him as a white individual in a social system that has programmed him throughout his life and programmed large numbers of people like him to focus on the genetics of people of color in such a way as to destroy people of color.
I would like to ask a question, and Dr. Shockley, if you could answer it yes or no, I would appreciate it. Do you believe that black people are inferior in intelligence because of their heredity?
I have a standard statement. It is not yes or no. It's memorized. I say at the same time every time, I think. What I say is this. My research leads me, and it's a tragic conclusion, really. My research leads me inescapably to the opinion that the major cause of the American Negro's intellectual and social deficits is hereditary and racially genetic in origin, and thus not remediable to a major degree by practical improvements in environment.
All right, if you believe that the position relatively of black Americans to white Americans is based on a genetic inferiority, and I will accept the responsibility for that word, then what do you see as the solution to the problem?
Well, I see the first aspect of this is to prevent the problem from becoming worse by dysgenics. This first word
Would you translate dysgenics for me and the audience? Would that be sterilization?
No. Dysgenics, you see, means what that other chart I showed you says.
Should blacks,
the least effective element.
Should blacks be sterilized?
No. I have a...
but if blacks are a problem and we do not allow...
This is inhumane. And I think one can find more humane solutions to this.
Well, then how would... Then
I would propose something in which one of the key phrases, is regardless of sex, race, or welfare status. And this is the proposal. I call it a thinking exercise. It's mentioned in that pamphlet that I showed that you can obtain. And it goes this way, that you would offer a bonus to everyone to be sterilized. Now, we know we have a population explosion problem. We know that in India, that bonuses in the form of transistor radios are offered to people.
Would this bonus be directed to black people specifically, more than whites?
Mr. Brown, what did I say just a moment ago? I said, regardless of sex, race, or welfare status.
Now, there is a group,
that's what I say.
There is a group of white people to whom this offer should be made also.
Absolutely. Now, the offer is based upon the best estimates, best scientific estimates that one can have of any genetically carried disabilities. Now, there is some, I think, that any humane person would have no doubt about. And Dr. Welsing talked about dominant and recessive genes. I want to point out that sometimes a dominant gene can be a very bad thing, and it is a very bad thing for a neurological disease called Huntington's chorea, which is something like multiple sclerosis.
Which is more prominent in white people than black people.
That is correct. And I think that one should offer a large bonus for anyone who might be potentially carrying Huntington's chorea.
Dr. Shockley,
beyond this, it goes on with some other factors in this, but Dr. Welsing wishes to speak.
Are you aware that white people have more genetic diseases that affect their nervous system than people of color, than black people?
I wouldn't be at all surprised. And I think blacks apparently have higher heart problems.
Would you suggest that all of these white people who are carrying these defective genes, you know, whose families may carry these defective genes, that they be examined and it would be suggested to them that they be sterilized? Would you suggest this?
Yes, I think I would, probably, in general.
Go ahead, you're on Black Journal, please.
what we know about ancient black civilizations, how can American blacks suddenly be genetically regressive?
Thank you.
Let me just say this. What is very interesting is in the study of biology, biologists who have studied evolution, one of the very interesting things that they say is that the more functional skin pigment cells in the animal kingdom, the higher you are on the scale of phylogenetic ascension. In other words, nature in the course of evolution went to its highest state when it produced a cell that could produce pigment, and that we were sliding backwards. The mutation to albinism is a step backwards in the scale of evolution. Are you aware of that, Dr. Shockley?
No, I'm not aware of that particular one. I am aware of another basic genetic difference, and that is that the rate of maturation of a neurological system gets longer and longer the more advanced the animal is. And that is one of the items on the racial difference, that the neurological development of blacks is faster than whites. Black babies walk on the average a month earlier than white babies. And the period of
black
gestation...
people are much more creative also than white.
Dr. Shockley, correct me if I'm incorrect. Didn't the Giselle schedule, which tested the intelligence of children, make a correlative between intelligence and walking early?
Yes.
And I would think it probably would have been negative.
No, it was not. It was positive.
Well,
the motor skills on the Giselle schedule indicated that earlier precocious walking children, there was a correlation between that and high intelligence.
This may be true. It might be true within a group. I'm not sure of that.
Well, maybe
I know that there is a correlation in terms of things earlier than walking. At the 6-month stage, Nancy Bailey at Berkeley has established that white children who come from the most advanced families and who later, when they become older, are out at the top. At the first 6 months, they are relatively retarded compared to children who are from families of less accomplishment and who don't go as far. But so there are a number of these things certainly to be brought in.
Right.
But this
Giselle schedule is a very authentic, accepted, institutional psychological experiment.
And so is the Nancy Bailey early test.
I'd like to take another caller. You're on Black Journal. Go ahead, please.
Hello. This question is addressed to Dr. Welsing. First, I would like to say that Mr. Brown and Dr. Welsing disprove immediately Dr. Shockley's concept, because here we have two highly intelligent, gifted people. But getting this out of the way, Dr. Welsing, wouldn't you agree that there is a strong genetic component to the inheritance of intelligence? Geneticists believe that 80% component is hereditary. Let me finish, Dr. Welsing. And then also, I think the association of skin color with intelligence is an erroneous concept. And I want your views on this. Isn't it true that the historic fate of black people, the tragic deprivation, the conditions under which they were raised, any people raised under these conditions would have an hereditary, evolutionary background, which could lead to poor capacity to generalize, to conceptualize, to be creative in the form field of ideas, and develop other excellent attributes. Now, this is not a racist idea. This could happen to any group who has a tragic history of the black people.
Thank you.
No, I do not feel that there's any evidence to suggest that 80% of the ability to come to terms with your environment, that has to do with heredity. I think that much of it has to do with the environmental opportunity that the genetic material is exposed to. I think that if we look at the black people, if we just take the black group, and we look at those people who have been able to achieve, and we look at their backgrounds, we will find that they have had substantial social and economic opportunities that maybe some of the segment of the black population has not had. We'll find the same thing in the white group. Those white people who have been socioeconomically deprived and at the bottom of the economic scale for whites, that these people are not performing in the same way that people who have extended socioeconomic opportunity. One of the very interesting things is that white women are now talking about women's liberation, and they are looking at their performance relative to white men, and they are saying, and all of the spokesmen for white women and men and women are also saying, that the reason that the white woman has less confidence in her performance and is not performing as well, relatively speaking, as the white male, has been the attitudes within the white family as to the role of the woman versus the role of the man. Now, what is interesting is that when white people are looking at the difference in the performance of the white woman and the white man on IQ tests, they can account for that on the basis of environmental influences. However, when they shift over into looking at whites relative to people of color, somehow they want to drop that understanding and that awareness.
It's been interesting, to say the least. I'm happy you had your say, Dr. Shockley, and Dr. Welsing. I'm happy you had yours, and thank you for being on Black Journal.
All right. So that was a very interesting debate that they had. Dr. Cress surely showed her warrior side, I would think. Doc, what were some of the key takeaways you got from that?
You know, one of the most significant takeaways that I got was the civility occurring between those two, despite them being on opposite ends, and even the callers into the show. You know, we live in a much different time where that civility, that understanding, that ability and desire, and really recognition of the worthiness of listening to your opponent is in many ways kind of lost. But in regards to the information that was shared, you know, you're dealing with, and I'm talking about from its totality, the belief that Black folk are, number one, inferior, and number two, are unworthy to even be on the face of the planet Earth. And there's this great saying that there are lies, damn lies, and then there are stats. And people are taking stats, and you saw him take some stats and try to put some significance on them in regards to the fact that Black folk are rural and agrarian workers, and that was supposed to translate into us being intellectually inferior. His logic and his theories are woefully inadequate, and Dr. Cress Welsing did an amazing job in addressing. And I agree with you. It desires to annihilate our people, nothing more, nothing less. It is another main pillar of white world supremacy.
Definitely. I think it was Dr. Cress Welsing. She kept bringing up the name Hitler, and you know what I'm looking at. I don't see no difference between Hitler and Roosevelt or any of these American presidents, or I don't even this guy, he talking about sterilization of Black people. I don't see no difference. They're all the same. And I think that for whatever reason, they're trying to put Hitler up like he's a special kind of white folk. He's a special kind of white folk.
He's an aberration.
Right. But he ain't. He's just like the rest of them. He was just more successful on his targets. What's your thoughts on that?
The thing is that when you look at it once again through the prism of white world supremacy and the desire to survive, which, it may sound strange, but they have every right to attempt to survive. I believe that anything that is living has an attempt to survive. Now, the means that they're going to go through to survive, that's where we can find some fault with. But I lecture, I was a fellow at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And I'll tell you, after that experience, I don't look at Adolf Hitler as a monster. I believe that the most appropriate term that was given to him, the most appropriate summation came from Minister Farrakhan when he refers to him as wickedly great. I don't look at him as being unusual or unique in being wickedly great. I see wickedly great men on high, even to this moment that we're speaking right now. his status is intentionally magnified to ensure that the wickedness of others who are very similar to him, light doesn't shine as bright. So you can look at it and say, well, we didn't, we didn't have death camps. Well, but you did have concentration camps that you put Japanese Americans in.
Mhm.
And, when the A. Philip Randolph threatens to march on Washington movement in 1941, it was predicated upon the idea of embarrassing America, showing what's beneath America's skirt to not only Germany, but to the world. That here you have a nation that claims to be democratic, claims to be for the right thing, yet at the exact same time, soldiers, meaning black soldiers fighting on their side, don't have the same rights as an enemy that's captured in a POW. So in many ways, I can't disagree necessarily totally with the idea that this wickedness that we see being talked about when you're looking at a figure like Adolf Hitler has been replicated by many other leaders.
Mhm. Definitely, I agree. And to go back to Mayat's point, where she says that Minister Farrakhan at Savior's Day wanted us to read "We Charge Genocide," and I just got the book and I
And
started.
you know what? Not to cut you off.
Mhm.
My cousin, Rashida Rawls, delivered a prayer at Savior's Day this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my little cousin, man, and her path. They're from Mansfield, like me. I was their big cousin in Columbus, right? And so
Mhm.
every weekend, their parents were very, very protective. So every weekend they would come down on Friday and stay with me, for
Mm.
years and then they would get up and go to Minister Daniel Muhammad's, go to the Masajid on Saturday and all of
Mhm.
that. Yeah, I was very proud. I wanted to say that,
Mhm.
that she delivered a prayer up at Savior's Day this year.
Wow. Wow. She's definitely very blessed. Very blessed. But yeah, he did. He told us to get the book, "We Charge Genocide," and read it. And
Mhm.
I started reading it last night. Um, and this is the work that they put together and gave to the United Nations. The United Nations accepted it, but of course did nothing about the information that was given. Um, I think, and I'm not saying this to be non-feeling about other people's suffering,
Mhm.
but I do believe that our suffering is the worst suffering that any people on this planet has ever been through.
Mhm.
Yeah, there was slavery in different parts of the world, but nothing like this.
Nothing like
Nothing
this.
like this.
It's disingenuous to
Mhm.
refer to the slavery that has occurred in other parts of the world to what occurred on this side of the Atlantic Ocean. Um, and I'm not just talking about black folk, American descendants of slavery. If you made it to be 22, 23 years old in the Caribbean during the slave experience there, you were an old man. They literally
Mhm.
worked them to death, and that's
Mhm.
it's just a fact. And once again, being at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, they tell their story so well. And I'm not trying to minimize what it is that they went through, but you're talking about 6 million dead. You're talking about with the transatlantic slave trade. You're talking about from 1500. I would argue up to this very day, because black folk are still being killed in American streets, and that's a part of American genocide. There's no way of comprehending the levels and the amounts of the millions, the hundreds of millions of persons of African descent who were killed, murdered during that process.
You know, Maya asked a question. She says, my question is, what did the authors expect the UN to do? Clearly, they are powerless. And you will hear it today, Doc, where different Black people who will say, you know, we got to take it to the UN, you know, we got to take it to the World Court. They're living in a delusion, thinking that the UN and the World Court is going to do something to America, which is just not going to happen.
You could have saved that postage and just sent it to the White House. You'd have had the same effect.
Exactly. And I want to go ahead and welcome in. What's the code? Peace and blessings. What's the code? Welcome. We're glad that you're here with us today. Realm in the Bush, Sister Cassie, peace and blessings. We're glad that you're here with us today as well. And Mayat, peace and blessings. We're glad that you're here with us today as well. Welcome, 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 welcome. We are discussing who is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and what is her contribution to the rise of Black people. Now, in her position, and she didn't back once Howard, you know, got rid of her. She didn't beg for them to bring her back or anything like that. How did she continue to survive? What did she do next, Doc?
You know, the thing is that once you have your name out there, you just become an independent scholar, you know, and in many ways it frees you up, you know, and one of the reasons why a person like that would be able to survive is the lecture circuit. So they're able to bring in life-sustaining money while still doing their research and still writing. Now, if you're able to do that, one could very well make a very significant argument of why in the world do you need the academy? Because in many ways, they're just a stifling force in regards to what it is that that you're doing. You know, these stories that she's talking about of what happened to her, they're not uncommon. I'm going to be honest with you. I think that they're more standard and common than one could ever imagine. Wow. Because principally, when you're talking about the academy and you're talking about professors and things like that, let's be very honest about it. And this isn't being elitist at all, but the outside world doesn't know what we do. They have no idea. They think that we teach a class or two, and then we're on the golf course. You know, truth of the matter is that very few Black academicians make it past 65. You know, I can count on one hand the brothers that I've been around, mentors of mine and what have you, who reached 65. And the first marriage failure rate is astronomical for us. It's very hard to be married to us. Very hard. Because you don't understand our world. You don't understand what we do. You know, you can't begin to comprehend that, we will work 16 hours. And in that 16 hours, we're going to be cordoned off. We're going to be writing. We're going to be thinking. We're going to be, so we're not going out to dinner. We're not going to the family reunion. We're not doing any of those things. We hang out with other academicians. And it's just what it is. It is a life that is truly not for everyone. You know, one of my colleagues, William Foster, who is probably the smartest Black man that I've ever met in my life, he made this statement that just rings so true in my soul. He says, the Black intellectual is the loneliest man in the world. And there's a lot to be said for that.
And I want to take this time out to welcome Christine Williams to the program. Peace and blessings, Queen. We're glad that you're here with us. And we're talking about who is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing and what is her contribution to the rise of Black people. Doc, do you believe that her life, her stand, helped to empower Black women to stand up and do the same?
Um, once again, this was, although we had the Alice Walkers and the Toni Morrisons and what have you, um, coming through at that time. Cress Welsing's message was not gender specific. It was aimed at uplifting all Black folk, Black men and Black women. So that's why I hesitate to say that. I believe that I believe that she had equal influence upon both Black men and Black women. You're talking about 1970s, 1980s Black studies. We were still Black at that time, and we were not so much divided. We had that one moment during the 1960s when many sisters gravitated towards this Black version of feminism called womanism. But by and large, we still realized that we needed each other during that time.
Mm-hmm. I want to, I'm going to go back to one more clip. Let's see. Okay, here it is.
You don't hear people who are white if they have I think that you see just automatic forgiveness when it comes to Black people being harmed or killed or injured by people who classify themselves as white. We don't hear people who are white if they have feel they have sustained some injury. Bill Cosby of having sexually or date raped them, and no white person would say to them, one or more, or all of them, a long time has passed. Don't you think it's time for you to forgive Mr. Cosby? Nobody would ever think of that. You see, nor would anybody think to ask a Semite of the Jewish religion, well, have you forgiven the German people? Have you forgiven the Nazis for what they did? Do you see? Nobody would even think of saying that. So I think that it is a part of Black people's tradition from the time of enslavement. Do you see, where the slave master could beat the Black person, and I could just envision the Black person being beaten and the slave master or the slave mistress would be saying, say that you forgive me. Do you see? And then giving them another lash. Say that you forgive me.
And so the black person doesn't have a choice but to say, I forgive, Master. I forgive. I forgive. I forgive. And I don't want to show any disrespect to the mother of Mr. Walker. I mean, I certainly understand what has happened to black people and where that pattern comes in. When we were in formal slavery, I heard a white female explain to a young black man, this was at a Race Relations Institute a number of years ago, and the young black man in a small group discussion, he said, I don't believe in racism, I'm a Christian. And an older white female said to him, son, we, meaning we white people, gave you that tradition. We gave you that religion. And we emphasized three things. Slave, obey your master. Turn the other cheek, and you will get your reward in heaven. And so that is the yoke that black people, I say by and large, are still under. And most black people are not thinking about or understanding that we are in a total system structure of racism. Well, see, you can't run an oppressive state, a plantation, or a prison and have the inmates become angry at the jailer. So you, if possible, you engage in the psychological warfare of teaching them a philosophy of forgiveness. Now, the prisoner or the slave on the plantation hasn't been let free. The prisoner in the prison hasn't been said, we forgive you, and so your sentence is terminated. No one is speaking to the prisoner or the slave on the plantation in that way. But the plantation is run by beating, well, first and foremost, I would say, and maybe somebody will be offended, I would hope not, that when you give the enslaved Africans an image of God that is the same image of the slave master, and say that you must behave yourself so that this image of God, which is the same image of the slave master, so that God will love you and admit you into heaven. You must forgive the slave master. Now that was the position that black people were in for hundreds of years, during the years of formal enslavement. And what could they do about it when they were beaten and killed at whim? You see, and so that's when these ideas were implanted, and we must begin to step back and view them more objectively and understand that this is an aspect of the maintenance of oppression. And those black people who are admonishing black people that they should forgive, I would say that those people have been harmed by having their self-respect as black people annihilated, whether they're conscious of it or whether they are subconscious.
Now, on this next clip, you're going to hear Dr. Frances Cress Welsing lay out when we should forgive. Let's go ahead and roll the clip.
And if we as black people decide that we are going to respect ourselves, and this is one of the things that has happened to black people in the 500 years of our oppression, including the phase of slavery, formal slavery, is that black self-respect has been completely annihilated. And so, you know, we say, okay, I forgive, and then we take the pain and frustration out on each other. It's just like in South Africa, truth and reconciliation. So the people who brutalize black people are allowed to go unpunished. But the pain that is inside of black people goes out towards one another, and the system of racism, white supremacy, continues. So I am making the recommendation for black people's mental health that black people take the position that all of these things that we are dealing with, the killing of black men every week, every other day, the incarceration of black men, the unjust sentencing, gentrification, the removal of black people from urban centers across this country, that all of this is the face of racism, white supremacy. And black people have to take the position, we're not going to be in the position of saying we forgive. No, what we're going to insist upon is, number one, that racism, white supremacy as a total system structure be recognized. And number two, when that system has been brought to an end and replaced with a system of justice, then the consideration of forgiveness, if that won't even be in order, because the system of injustice will have been removed and a system of justice established. Now that's my position as a black psychiatrist, and I would say that I'm certainly recommending that as important for black people's mental health in this system, that the foundation of the position is that we are going to have respect for ourselves second to none. And instead of denying and making apologies for the system of racism, white supremacy, that we are going to hold people who class. Classify themselves as white, because the only reason for the white classification is to take advantage of the established and structured system of racism, white supremacy, and that we are going to hold people who classify themselves as white responsible. We're not going to spend any time hating white people, but we are going to hold every person.
Okay. No, we have internet issues, but basically she's saying that, we should not be automatically forgiving our oppressors for the things they have done. It's erroneous for us, after they kill our people, then we run, oh, I forgive, I forgive, I forgive. And looking at Mayat's comment, we need discipline, then knowledge of self. They fear those with it and control those without it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's right there, right on point. She was also talking about justice, that without justice, the balance of the mind goes AWOL, goes crazy. So you can't be a people who have been denied justice for centuries and expect to be sane. That's a really, really big issue, right then and there of itself. And that brings me back to the conclusion of what Rand Paul quoted to black people when he was running for president. He said, I like Malcolm X. Malcolm X told you, you're a man, you don't go beg some other man for justice. You take justice.
Mhm.
You take justice. Now he went, I forgot what city he was in, but he was running for president and he went down there where it was nothing but us and was talking exactly like that.
Mhm.
When do you think, do you think that the mass of us will be able to handle that type of message?
Not at all. Not at all. You know, when you're talking about the idea of justice, and it's one of the things that just sticks in my craw. I'm a humongous Dateline watcher,
Mm.
and to see someone get killed, and they'll show you the trial, and then if the person is convicted, you hear the family saying, "Well, at least we got justice for them." No, you didn't.
No, we didn't.
That's not justice. Justice would be your loved one coming home with you tonight, and this person taking their place in the grave. That's just. That's justice. Um, God help our people, because you're talking about a people who've been so beat down that they're willing to do anything if they think, and say anything if they think it will remove them out of the long reach of white folk who are handing out these weapons.
Mhm.
And history has shown us repeatedly there's nothing you can do, nothing that you can say that will save you when it's your turn. When it's your turn, it's your turn. And every Negro that I know has gotten a turn in one way or another.
Mhm. Exactly. Deacon said, in order to have all this work, we must live amongst each other and literally work things out. It's a sacrifice that I don't think we are willing to make to accept at this moment. What's your thoughts on that, Doc?
It would be a hell of a sacrifice, but the harshest part of that is that we have some in our midst who are simply, disagreeable to get along with. They're not trying to get along with you. They have become full-blown capitalists, which makes them predators. And they're trying to better their status, come hook or crook. They will lie to you, they will cheat, they will beat on you, they will economically exploit you, they will run con games and scams on you to get in your resources, trying to, in many ways, capitalize upon your goodness and your willingness to help our people. Lord knows we got more than enough examples of individuals like that. We're dealing with a psychological problem. We're dealing with a moral problem. We're dealing with a love problem. We don't love ourselves, and we don't love each other. There's certain things that you simply should not do if you have love for a person. There's certain things that if you see something that needs to be done, you need to go ahead and do it if it's dealing with someone that you love.
Right.
And we need to go ahead and start saying hi to each other. That would be an improvement. If all Black folk for 1 week looked each other in the eye, instead of doing that 6 to 9 foot look away or look down at the ground that we do to avoid acknowledging another person's humanity, that would be an improvement over where we are right now. If we could get Black women to smile, and we could get Black men to smile at Black women, that would be an improvement. Courtesy, being polite, as Kevin Samuels would often say, treat each other like you treat them white folk down at your job. Because there's no way that you didn't kept that job and you behave the way down there, the way that you behave when you're around us.
Right.
So it's psychological, and you're caught up in this, and you're comfortable in it. It's your only reality, and it has to be scary for somebody to come along and tell you, yo, you're wrong in how you're looking at this, because it's been your only reality. So we have to do a much better job of dealing with that. We have to do a much better job of holding each other's feet to the fire. We have to do a much better job of being us, of being we.
Definitely. Christine Williams says, justice is about balance between people, guaranteeing that no one is being mistreated And two, guaranteeing that everyone who needs help gets help ASAP. Neely Fuller. Do you think that when you live in America around white folks, you're not going to, and when I say this, I'm speaking of not just white folks that we can look and see that they white. I'm talking about the white folks that even black because they are white-minded.
The Negropeans.
Yes, the Negropeans. Them, we can't secure justice until they are removed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
Exactly. Oh boy. Well, we are at our time. Doc, closing comments. How do you think? Or no, not that question, but how should we remember Dr. Frances Cress Welsing? How do we honor her since she has gone and left us? How do we honor her?
I would say to study her words, study her, understand that she is an unadulterated truth teller, and to hope that we can be even 1/100th courageous as she is, and make it a pattern of being informed, being bold, being direct, and being courageous enough to speak truth to power, regardless of who that power is and where it's situated within our lives.
Definitely. And I just want to point this out what Sister Christine Williams says. Respect is not lying to each other. Stop lying to each other. And that's very truthful. That's very true. We got to be able to tell each other the truth and be brotherly, be sisterly.
And let that truth sit there. That truth doesn't need to be tended to. You ain't got to alter that truth at all. Let it sit there like a boulder. Okay.
Exactly. And then she says, it's about evolving to become the universal people who only practice justice, balance between people. Awesome. Excellent program. Well, we definitely thank everybody that came out to support the program. Thank everybody who listened, who helped us to have the good program that we had. And we thank y'all. We love y'all because you help us do what we do, most definitely. And so we want to thank you all. And we will be back with our program. Next program we will have. Hopefully we can put one together before Friday. I would like to do another program before Friday.
Look here, baby, I'm on spring break. Man, look at here. We can come on at 3:15 a.m. I'm free. You just don't know. I feel like dancing a jig. I am free. I ain't to go out there. Oh my God. And I'm free from both jobs. Oh, God is just too good to me.
I know that's right. And as we always say, you kill the nigga in you, I'm going to kill the nigga in me, and our God will reign supreme. We are Black first, today, tomorrow, and forever. Love you, family. Peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom.
You better get the message and get it straight. You're going to need some bridge work. It's simple as that. Because we're living in judgment. We're living in implementation.